Hey folks, we're back with another episode of Business and Life Stories with Mike and James. Our guest this week is Elizabeth Berry. She's known as the Kind Communicator. If you have not read her books, make a note to do that right away. There is a link below the video, as always, how to get a hold of our guest. She has lots of activity going on LinkedIn, and she was recommended to us by several of our previous guests, including the famous airborne soldier, Jamie J.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, yay, Jamie. Anyway, welcome, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here to have our conversations.
So, Kind Communicator. You've written a lot of great things. How do we navigate in today's business climate, political climate, social climate? Being kind quite often gets us stomped on. But we can't stop being kind. We can't stop being who we are. So yes. How do you recharge when people smack you upside the head?
Yeah, that actually happened the other day. It's interesting. So you brought up the social and the political, and I'll start with that, because I think that what I always tell people about the kindness innovation or the Kind Communicator and what it has created over the past couple of years is that it's not just about being nice. It's about being direct, being thoughtful, respectful, and sharing our authenticity with the world. It's based on the idea of going beyond the ego, going beyond who we think we ought to be, and really truly stepping into who we are. And when being kind means making the decision to stay quiet because we don't want to tick anybody off, or share our point of view because what we believe in matters. I think that when we share what we have to say, we release something. We release all the good hormones in the body, the endorphins that make us feel really good as a human being on the planet on that given day. And I think that for me, especially in a political climate of thinking about being kind and communication, is being very careful of the verbiage, and almost as if it's like a chess game, right? Because if we do speak up in the wrong way, a certain group of individuals will kind of jump on you and try to prove you wrong. I think that the biggest problem of the climate today is that everyone wants to judge and point and blame and create fault, where it's creating such a division and such a rift in humanity. I thought the other night I was up for like 2 hours in the middle of the night, and I was just thinking to myself, the verbiage right now, the climate, the way that things are, it's just, there's this falsity, this fear, and fear creation, and adults can create a relationship with fear, or we can actually create a relationship with optimism. And my message to anyone in today's very delicate eggshell climate is to truly be their authentic self, and to challenge themselves with playing a chess game with their words. And most people will surprise themselves that they can be authentic and can share what they need to say in a direct and authentic way. And it'll end up pissing less people off and end up sharing a message of optimism versus bringing in the fear.
Yeah, I love that. One of the principles I learned from you when I first started reading your works was about happiness destination addiction.
Yes.
Where we'll say to ourselves, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if, and we don't stop to enjoy what we're doing in the moment. So I have struggled a little bit with applying that in some business context. Sometimes I'll be speaking to someone and I'm not sure that they're hearing what I'm saying, which is a communication issue. What are some good ways to project the kindness that we have within, or even if it's a situation where we're having to make a tough decision or say no to a contract or something, or the other person's having to hear us say no, how do we convey that we're really being kind and positive? And even if they look like they might come across the table and dump their water on our head or something.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to know your truth, right? Knowing your truth before you speak your truth is really sharing what your authenticity is on the inside. The next thing to do is start with gratitude and start with a positivity, right? Be a solutions-based thinker and speaker, as I said in my book, Design Your Mind to Be Kind. When we can come across in a conversation that may be um, difficult or maybe combative, it's our approach, right? We always think of someone else when they put up a defense as it might be their fault or they took it the wrong way, but it also is both ways, because our approach matters so very much. And most of the times it's not really just that one side. It really is us honing in on how we approach what we say and how we say it. That includes body language. So the first thing to do is know your truth. And then the second thing to do is share your truth. As Wayne Dyer said, never die with your music inside of you. Always share what you have to say. And when you start to speak it, start with a positive, start with gratitude, say thank you. Because when you say thank you right up front, walls come down immediately. They want to be on the same page. They might not agree with you, but their defenses come a little bit lower. And then you can start the conversation with what is really working and what's not, which is less emotion, more reality. The more you get rid of the emotion and everything, you're honestly left with the reality. So I think that coming from that standpoint with those 4 points can really help anyone in firing a client or not wanting to work with a client anymore, any sort of difficult conversations.
Well, that's really, really good advice. You reminded me of something that I had learned when I first started working. It used to be if you were running late to a meeting, everyone would do it.
Mm-hmm.
They'd come in and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm late for the meeting," and they'd sit down, just rush. And one day we had a very high-level manager come in a few minutes late, and he said, "Thank you for waiting for me."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You know what? I'm going to steal that phrase.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm late now, I just say thanks for waiting."
Yeah. I thank you.
So
I appreciate you. Both of those statements said really undo any of the unresolved tension before anything gets said in the beginning.
Very good.
Love it.
Do you think, Elizabeth, do you think that, I guess, where can people who are naturally confident really find the confidence to, I mean, they might be doing their best and living their truth, but they don't necessarily they don't feel capable to say their truth. And I think so the first question is about the confidence. Where can that come from in the foreground? But I think in the background too, it's having the resilience, which kind of backs up the confidence, right? Because even if you say your truth and someone might not agree with you, and then you need that resilience to sort of be able to shed the water off your back, right? So where do you think the relationship, kind of the kindness is in the center, but when do you think the relationship of like confidence and resilience sort of enters that kind of equation?
Well, the first step to entering that confidence, thank you, James, for that great question, is to really get out of your head. Most of us are not confident and insecure because we're living in our heads. So the first step that I would say to someone in that position is to get out of your head, step into your heart. Easier said than done. One of the greatest ways that we can do that as human beings is write down what we're thinking. And it's not just about journaling or buying a journal and keeping it next to your bed, which is very cliche, although it's very helpful, is to just write everything down of what you're thinking. I mean, I have pages here that this is from a client meeting last night. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you're not writing a book that's going to get published. You're just taking what's here and getting it out. And like to the last book that I just wrote, Lead by Example, I wrote a philosophy that really talks about how the mind can be so heavy, and then the emotions get heavy, and then your spirit gets heavy, and then the words don't really come out right. So the first step is get it out. And if it's on I have like these little white index cards here. I have little notepads. I have a big notepad. I mean, I'm the person that likes to write everything down and then I check it off, or I just keep it around. The next step to that resilience is to take risks, right? Get out of your comfort zone. Most people who are insecure have the hardest time taking that risk. You can either dip your foot in the pool or you can jump in. And the beautiful part about taking risks is that when you take your first risk, you're going to say, well, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. If it was as hard, you're going to say, I'm going to try again. So the first step is really doing it, right? So get it out of your head and take the risk for confidence and that resilience.
It's I wonder whether it's a lot harder to take risks for people to take risks nowadays, because obviously, like thousands of years ago, tribes had to take risks, hunters and warriors had to take risks, and obviously, as a percentage of the population, the people who actively have to take risks is relatively tiny now, compared with, and I know that my parents' childhood, possibly mine, but there was a time where, hey, be back by tea. Like just go off and play. And my dad used to tell me, he was born in 39. So they used to go and play in the bomb shelters, the bomb craters of their town, or of their city. Well, now you can't walk down the street without a bollard being in a slight undulation, right? I mean, like, I would genuinely be concerned if my children were going and play in a recently bombed up bomb crater. But it's kind of like, why are we? I mean, obviously there were accidents, and obviously accidents with children or anyone are tragic. But I wonder whether it's a society now where it's more judgmental. Like back in the day, perhaps 60 or 70 years ago, it was like, it wasn't quite so judgmental. Whereas I wonder now whether, with social media and just maybe the stress of everything, society itself has become more judgmental. And it's like, what on earth were you thinking? Or why didn't you do such and such? Or why on earth? And do you think that has something to play, that might be an element in why people maybe are reluctant, or even have switched off knowing how to take a risk, even a social risk, which isn't anything like playing in a bomb crater or hunting woolly mammoths? But what do you think the relationship is around the critique of taking risks and people wanting to step outside and speak their heart and speak their truth?
It's their relationship with fear. And society right now is creating a lot of fear, and a lot of it is manufactured fear. So it's again, going back to that first statement of knowing your truth and then being able to speak your truth. Knowing your truth is actually fear-based as well, because many of us have that societal obstacle right now of what to believe, what's true, what's not true, what's real, what's not real. And I think that society at this point, with the eggshells and the canceling and the judgments and the cyberbullying, huge. Cyberbullying is so huge. I had a gentleman the other day say a very not nice thing, because I had mentioned something about a well-known publication that I wasn't really happy with their views and their fear-based posts. I was looking forward to their business posts, and I said, this is a lot of manufactured fear. Give us some business and insightful optimism. And I was jumped on. And these people are cyber bullies. So I think that society has a huge factor in that. And I think that a lot of people hide behind the computer and have a lot to say. And then they come at you. It's like a chicken pecking. You know, we heard the rooster. That rooster's, these people are like roosters, peck, 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 peck. So what I have to say, and for someone that is very insular and insecure and not as confident, that will act their truth. So the real big factor is, again, that brain dump of creating what's inside of the head, not just the head, but the heart and the spirit, because otherwise, James and Michael, we are walking around with heavy bricks on our back, with something to say and no vehicle and no voice to say it, or no fingers to type it. And I think that is holding a lot of us back. So if we can get out of that manufactured fear, if we can get out of that stone cold cycle of I'm not going to take that risk, and just Pink has this great song, throw glitter in the air, and I love the idea of it, of just throwing glitter in the air. And you can hear that song and play that song, maybe you'll remember this this podcast today, but just the idea of saying I'm going to just do this and I'm going to say it. And then when you watch the repercussions, again, it goes back to the idea in the beginning. Start to play a chess game with yourself about how you can phrase things. Phraseology is one of my, it's one of my prized possessions, especially on social, because we don't want to upset people. And then we also have to play within the boundaries of our fans and our businesses and our colleagues. So I ultimately like to keep my delicate conversations with the people where I can be roaring loud with. And when I do want to speak my truth, because we cannot be silent in today's world, because if we are silent, then that means that we've lost and we're suppressed. And we don't really want to do that. We want to be light and levity. So sharing that truth and becoming a player in the game of phraseology with yourself. Play the chess game with yourself. And even if you lose a few times, just bring the board back out.
I mean, that is fantastic. And I think you hit upon a very important point, that today's society, online and offline, is very divided. And the narratives are so polarizing. There's the logical, and then there's the conspiratorial, and there's everything in between. And as we all know, I feel one of the tragedies of today's situation is it's yet another division. There might have been racial divisions in the past. There's always political divisions. There's health divisions. There's education philosophies, which are different. Obviously, religious divisions have been huge throughout history. But now there's almost kind of vaccine, very no-vax, COVID. Yes, it doesn't. Yes, maybe it exists, or was it manufactured, or all this whole thing's just driving yet another wedge within society, within friends, and within family. And it's incredibly tough. And it's a super tough time for people to actually know their truth, isn't it? Because if they're not careful, someone or social media can present a very convincing case for ABC, and then someone else says, well, that's total BS, it's actually XYZ. And then I'm thinking, well, where's my truth? I guess I mean, we've probably already covered this, but are there any tips, maybe physical tips, or are there any tips where people can maybe know how to get back to their truth within themselves, and so they don't continually get swayed and get far too confused and everything else?
I would say that there is division. It is unfortunate. And as much as media grows, as much as technology grows and the social space grows, we are going to see further division. So with someone who is on a specific side, like myself, who I can't really come out 100%, but I'll comment here and there when I want to, because I feel compelled to, because it's my belief system. I'm not going to suppress my beliefs, because we only have this one world and this one body and soul that on this go around per se. But what I would say is, for someone who really wants to share something, share it with optimism and share it with a positive, right? A lot of, again, we're coming up against this manufactured fear and this judgmental, blaming, fault, you're wrong. I also had a gentleman this past week who is on another side as myself, and he sent me this long message. And everyone always says the same thing on that particular side. And I said, gee, do you guys have a playbook? Because everyone says the same thing, and they just want to fight, but they all say the same thing. And it's just so difficult. And I just said to him, but why can't we just disagree with this? Why do I need to give you my facts? Because as soon as I give you my facts, you're going to bring them down and say that they're not real. So I think that if we can, like the tips for me would be to stay positive no matter what viewpoint and no matter what your truth is, so that you don't get swallowed by the big bad wolf of blame and judgment and manufactured fear-based people who are living in fear, believing in fear, and making you wrong for not being fearful. So the more optimistic you can be, absolutely stay on that train. The next thing you can do is don't carry it with you. Take a walk. I've actually been taking up to 3 walks per day, and it has changed my molecular biology as a person. So take a walk and shake it off. Don't take things personally. It's a great tactic from one of the best books out there about the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally, and don't continue to go back and forth with people. What I've found is that when someone is cyberbullying or not nice, you can stand up for yourself. And I would say do it tactically, but don't have a fight. Whenever someone has said to me, they're like, oh, I didn't know a yogi had this perspective, or I didn't know that someone, with kindness has this perspective politically or health-wise, and it just surprises them. And I think that that's very disparaging to know that if that bothers them so much about what we think. And it just goes back to humanity and us really coming together versus being so divided. And life can be so much more fun when we just really love our fellow people and be able to agree and disagree without having some sort of fight and judgment day of where your facts are.
Yeah, 100%.
That's really well said. So something you could really help me with, I'm sure some of our listeners have experienced this. We have a certain number of business analysts that listen in. We're kind of in the, what we call behavioral finance world. We're kind of looking at what managers are likely to do well with companies and why, and that sort of thing. And one of the things I run into time and again is you've been in a meeting with a female person, and start to get the sense they're already starting to make judgments, right? Just off body language and tone of voice and all that. So what are some ways that a gentleman can project kindness and, I mean, not being a doormat or anything like that, but I mean, genuinely being kind and speaking our truth. Are there any particular phrases that especially younger generations of women are looking for or not happy with?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because a lot of times, whether we're in the virtual world or in an office setting, people create energy. Like my last book, Lead by Example, talks about the circumstances of our lives do not define us, our behavior does. And again, it talks about the kind communicator philosophy of going through the mind, the heart, and the spirit, which creates and crafts the words and the body language that we use. So what you're talking about is essentially our behavior carries us into the room before we even get there. And our energy is there before we even get there. So if you're in a room with a woman or a man who is not happy, not nice, already to sink their teeth or their claws into you, and you can feel their energy without them even speaking. I mean, sometimes their eyes can like put lasers through the back of your head, and you're like, well, wait a minute, like I didn't even say anything yet. Why is your energy like that? You have to recognize that they might be coming from a really big divorce. They might be completely unhappy, miserable people. And what they say is misery loves company.
Right.
So to soften them, right? To soften yourself and to soften their edge, because at the end of the day, we can't change them, but to not, again, going back to the ego wants us to put up a defense when we walk into a room when someone's energy already has it out for us. And whether it's a female or a male, I mean, I've had males jealous of me. I had females when I was in my early corporate days. Just I would rise up and everyone would be like, all right, Elizabeth, sales. And they would just squash me. And that was before I knew any of this work. So I was just so naive. I didn't know how to handle it. And I look back now, wow, their energy was speaking before they even did anything. And most of us don't know what to do in those certain instances. So, and what happens is the ontology of the body starts to speak, right, Michael? So your stomach starts to bubble, you start to sweat, you start heart palpitations, you're starting to tell yourself stories in your head. Don't say this, don't say that, you're going to piss her off, she's a bitch. You know, whatever is going on in your head starts to take you away from the present moment. So I always tell my clients, every client that I work with, whether it's for personal or professional development coaching, is to breathe. And we forget to breathe in those certain situations.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And when you don't breathe, nothing good can come out of that. So if anybody is watching right now and they've been in certain meetings, whether it's virtual or in person, and someone has it out for you, or their energy isn't 100% on par, it could be a cultural difference. It could be them coming from a bad day, or it could be that they just don't like you. And unfortunately, that's just the world that we're living in. And we just that's where, going back to what we talked about earlier with James, is to come back to our truth, know our truth, and to have our confidence. And that's the point when you turn a meeting into fun for yourself. It's like your game. Like by the end of this meeting, how can I make that person just fall in love with me? Even if you fall flat on your face, but you make it your game. So at the end of the day, like having fun with something that is a situation that's not so great, you just walk out and be like, all right, again, like Pink said, throw glitter in the air.
I love that idea. I'm going to start applying that, just make it a game and see if I can get them to like me.
Yeah, and breathe and smile.
And that's really important. And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm 6'6".
Yeah.
240 pounds. I'm a large physical presence in a room.
Yes.
And when I smile, what I've learned is to make sure I'm not too close to somebody, because it's a little scary sometimes. You have to be 3 or 4 seats away from a person, and I smile, they relax, but much closer than that. So I've seen photos of you on stage. You're kind of on the other end, right? So do you find it helpful as a shorter person if a tall person sits down or backs up, or what? Are you confident enough you don't care anymore?
I think that I'm confident no matter what, but I think that people that are listening might be self-conscious about certain things, whether it's weight or height or the way they look or aging or whatever that may be. And when that comes into play, we go back to that beyond ego mentality. Go beyond who you think you ought to be and step into who you authentically are. And again, just breathe and smile.
Breathe and smile.
And then have fun with the moments, because at the end of the day, you can be in service to people, and it doesn't have anything to do with what we look like. I mean, if we were all blind, we wouldn't have so many prejudices that we have. Although they would still be there because we all have mouths, right?
Right.
But if we really just start to go beyond that shell of a person, you really start to fall in love with people. But going back to your comments about I'm 6'6" and I'm 200 and something pounds, I have to be careful. I think that's really a really wise thing to do. It's like knowing who you are and knowing the effect that you have on people. Your energy precedes you and your legacy builds behind. So the more that you know who you are and how to work a room and how to own a room, whether it's virtual or in person, you're going to wow more people with that knowledge. It's called awareness. I had my mastermind meeting last night, and if anybody is interested, my 2022 mastermind is coming up starting January 2022. You should join. So in our mastermind meeting last night, we were talking about getting over perfectionism and how hard it is for so many of us to just be okay with our flaws. And when we have that perfectionism, when we build those walls within ourselves, we can build wall after wall after wall. And it's so tough to break through our own walls, let alone other people's walls. So that brings such a division between people. But when you start to have that personal awareness, that breath, that calmness, that present moment, you stop rushing, you start staying in the moment. You start to build the awareness of who you are and how you show up to people so that nobody can rattle you anymore. And it took me a hell of a lot of time to get that. And then, in my last book, I wrote about that and Lead by Example. We don't have to be rattled by naysayers anymore. It's really in how we show up, and that the power of silence is so on point for all of us to reflect and to speak less, listen more, smile and breathe, and just appreciate the moment and stop rushing and start being present.
Oh,
Amazing.
I felt like we just went to a master's degree in communication. This is amazing.
Yay!
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to jump off, but maybe I'll be able to come back and join. But Elizabeth, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've so enjoyed this conversation, and I know that you Mike will continue to explore what really is such a relevant and fascinating and such an important topic, and so present as well. So
yes,
thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
And also, all our audience, put in the comment section your number one reason why you think James had to go. Whoever has the funniest answer, we're going to send you a special prize. So make sure you do that. Oh, this has been such a great interview. So down below the video, we'll have links where people can find you and find your mastermind. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Just feel so good about what it is it's in your heart, that you don't hold it back, because you don't want to be 90 and look back and say, I wish I would have said I love you. I wish I would have worked less and paid attention to the people around me more. We want to live with a state of presence in the now. And if you're ready to start now, then that's the first step of becoming a kind communicator.
Wow, thank you so much. It was just brilliant.
Thank you.